There are moments unfolding in your life that defy explanation, experiences so intimate, so mysterious, that words fail to capture them, patterns too precise to be random, dreams that feel more vivid than the waking world, insights that arrive uninvited, as if whispered by something beyond reason. You sense things before they happen, and sometimes you just know without ever being taught. Carl Jung dedicated his entire life to studying these very mysteries, and what he discovered was nothing short of revolutionary. These strange experiences aren't signs that you're losing your mind. They're proof that you're finally meeting yourself on a deeper level. Today, we'll explore the 5 profound experiences Jung identified, experiences that emerge only in those who are undergoing a true spiritual awakening. They are precise, unmistakable, and once you recognize them, you'll begin to see exactly where you are on your path of consciousness, and perhaps for the first time, you'll understand why you've been feeling so isolated. It's not madness, it's awareness. You are perceiving reality in ways most people haven't yet awakened to. Here's the insight that changes everything. Jung discovered that spiritual awakening isn't merely a change in mindset or perspective. It's the activation of dormant psychological functions that have been asleep within the collective human psyche for centuries. These aren't poetic metaphors or mystical exaggerations. They are observable, measurable shifts in perception that forever alter how you experience existence itself. And once this inner mechanism awakens, it cannot be switched off. The first of these awakenings will sound familiar if you've truly begun this journey. Jung called it synchronicity, but most people misunderstand what he meant. Synchronicity isn't just about meaningful coincidences. It is what Jung described as a causal connecting principle, mysterious intelligence, through which reality itself begins to communicate with you through symbols, patterns, and events that defy ordinary logic. Life begins speaking your language, and that is something only the awakened truly experience. At a certain point in your awakening, synchronicities stop being rare, magical surprises, and become an ongoing conversation with the universe. It's as if reality itself begins responding to your inner state in real time. You think of someone, and moments later, they call. You silently ask a question, and a passing stranger's words deliver the exact answer you needed to hear. The repetition of numbers 1111, 333, 444 appears not sporadically, but daily, as if reality is tapping you on the shoulder saying, "I'm here, pay attention." Books seem to fall open to the very paragraph that holds your next insight. A song on the radio carries lyrics that mirror your exact emotions. You start realizing that nothing is random anymore. Jung himself experienced this phenomenon deeply during his own awakening. He wrote, "Synchronicities are not accidents. They are the universe becoming conscious of itself through you." And here's what changes everything. Jung discovered that these events don't just happen randomly. They intensify once your consciousness crosses a certain threshold. It's like you've tuned into a frequency that has always been broadcasting, but you finally learned how to listen. One of Jung's patients, a devoted scientist who once believed only in logic and measurable cause and effect, described it perfectly. "I used to live in a world ruled by reason and linear thinking. Now I live in a world woven with meaning. Every day feels like the universe is speaking to me through small, miraculous events that no longer feel random." He went on to describe how a billboard would answer his morning question, or how a bird would appear the moment he needed reassurance, how his late grandmother's favorite song would play just as he stood at a crossroads, unsure which path to take, as if she was still guiding him from beyond. But here's the secret that only those truly awakened understand. Synchronicities cannot be forced. The moment you try to make them happen, or use them as tools of control or ego gratification, they vanish. Their magic lies in authenticity. They flow effortlessly only when you're aligned with what Jung called the self, your deepest, most authentic truth. When your thoughts, emotions, and actions harmonize with your soul's purpose, reality itself begins to mirror that truth back to you. It's as if the universe can instantly tell when you're pretending, and when you're real, and when you are real. Life becomes a mirror that speaks in symbols, timing, and miracles. But this awakening brings with it a quiet ache, a kind of cosmic loneliness that words can barely touch. How do you explain to someone that reality itself has begun to speak to you, that you're not chasing patterns out of madness, but witnessing the living intelligence beneath everything? Most people won't understand. They'll tell you you're imagining things, seeing meaning where there is none, projecting fantasies onto coincidence. To them, the world is still mechanical, a random sequence of disconnected events. But to you, the veil has lifted. You've become conscious enough to perceive what Jung called the annus mundus, the one world, the invisible web of unity that binds every heartbeat, every moment, every atom of existence together. You can't prove it. You can't reproduce it on command. Synchronicities are not performances. They are intimate communications between your soul and the infinite. They happen in sacred timing, not human timing. And this is where the solitude sets in. You start to realize that your awakening has pulled you into a dimension of awareness few can yet comprehend. You are seeing connections others cannot see, and that very clarity becomes both a gift and a burden. Jung understood this deeply. He wrote, "The privilege of consciousness is also its burden. To awaken is to see, and to see is to stand apart, not above others, but outside their familiar dream. You begin to feel the distance between worlds, between the life you once lived and the reality you now perceive. Synchronicities become your secret language with existence, exquisite, intimate, and often unspeakably isolating. Each sign feels like a message meant only for you, each pattern a whisper from the universe reminding you that you are part of something vast and eternal. It is beautiful beyond measure, but also profoundly lonely. And yet, as Jung discovered, this loneliness is only the threshold, the initiation into something even more transformative. Because once you learn to live with this new sight, another experience begins to awaken within you, one that doesn't just change how you see reality, but who you are within it. This is the discovery of Jung's that almost no one talks about, and yet it may be his most important of all. He called it the transcendent function. But don't let the term mislead you. This isn't about transcendence in the escapist or spiritual bypass sense. It's not about floating above your humanity or denying your pain. The transcendent function is a psychological capacity, one that only awakens in those who have reached a certain depth of consciousness. It is the ability to hold opposites without choosing sides, to stand in the center of paradox without the desperate need to resolve it. Here's what that really means. While most people are caught in the duality of either or thinking, the awakened begin to live in the state of both. And you can grieve and rejoice in the same breath. You can see the divine radiance in someone while also witnessing their human shadow and love them more deeply because of it. You can recognize that life is both utterly meaningless and infinitely meaningful, and somehow both are true. Jung wrote, "The transcendent function is the bridge between consciousness and the unconscious. It allows opposing forces to generate a third thing, not a compromise, but a new creation that includes both and transcends both." In other words, awakening doesn't make you choose sides, it expands you beyond the need to choose. Before awakening, your mind divides everything into neat categories: optimistic or pessimistic, spiritual or material, logical or intuitive. But when the transcendent function activates, all those walls collapse. You become what Jung called a living paradox, a consciousness vast enough to contain contradictions that would shatter an ordinary psyche. One of Jung's patients described the moment it happened within her. "It was as though my mind suddenly became wide enough to hold everything. I could feel my mother's death as both the worst tragedy of my life and the most sacred gift I was ever given. Both were entirely true, not balanced, not half and half, but completely and simultaneously true. My mind didn't break from the contradiction. It expanded to hold it. That's the essence of awakening, not escaping duality, but becoming large enough to contain it. And this is why awakened people often seem baffling to others. You can be profoundly spiritual, and yet utterly grounded in the material world. You can be fully present in this moment while seeing far beyond it. You can be absolutely devoted to your path while completely unattached to its outcome. To the linear mind you appear inconsistent, even hypocritical. But you're not confused, you're comprehensive. You've become vast enough to embody all truths at once. The transcendent function doesn't just expand perception, it births spontaneous wisdom. Answers to impossible problems arrive effortlessly. Insights download whole and complete, as if from nowhere. You find yourself knowing things you were never taught, saying things you didn't plan to say, creating things that seem to come through you rather than from you. And yet, this isn't fantasy or mystical pretense. It's what happens when your conscious and unconscious mind finally begin to cooperate, when the entire field of your being becomes one instrument of awareness. One of Jung's analyzans, a rational businessman with no prior interest in spirituality, described it this way: I started having dreams that came true not metaphorically, but literally. I dreamt my brother calling about our father's heart attack. 3 days before it happened, I dreamt a conversation with my boss about a promotion, down to the color of his tie. A week before it occurred. I can't tell anyone, they'd think I'm insane. But I'm not predicting the future. I'm remembering it from my dreams. Even more profound are what Jung termed big dreams, experiences so powerful that they alter the trajectory of your entire life. These aren't dreams to be interpreted or dissected. They are initiations that transform you at the cellular level. You awaken changed, as if you've died and been reborn inside the same body. Within these dreams, you may encounter radiant presences, luminous beings who teach not through words, but through vibration and presence. You may journey through landscapes that don't exist on Earth, yet feel more familiar than home. You may witness symbols so alive, so saturated with meaning, that one glimpse of them permanently shifts your understanding of existence. And sometimes, you experience death and rebirth so vivid that you awaken trembling, knowing something in you truly crossed over and returned. But here lies the loneliness of awakened dreaming. These experiences are impossible to convey. You can describe them, but never transmit their essence. It's like trying to explain color to someone who has never seen. These dreams carry a sacred charge, what Jung called the numinous, the holy presence, and its vibration cannot be transferred through words. You might try to share them, but you'll see the polite smiles, the blank stares, the subtle withdrawal. People will tell you it's imagination or symbolism or coincidence, but you'll know it was none of those things. You weren't dreaming about something. You were inside something real, something vast. And this realization creates a profound split within you. Your dream life becomes more meaningful, more authentic, more alive than your waking life. You start to feel that when your eyes close, you return home, and when you wake, you're only visiting. You begin to look forward to sleep, not as an escape from the world, but as a return to it. Night becomes a portal, a sacred threshold, where your soul reunites with depths of reality, unreachable by waking consciousness. In that space between worlds, you remember what Jung meant when he wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." You come to understand that true awakening doesn't pull you away from dreaming, it transforms the dream itself. It becomes a conscious act of participation in creation. The dream becomes the temple of your awakening. And yet, this realization is not something you can easily explain. The kind of dreaming Jung spoke of, the lucid, visionary, soul-level dreaming, is accessible only to those whose awareness has expanded enough to hold it. For the unawakened, dreams are stories. For the awakened, they are realities. Before we explore the final two experiences, Jung identified the most profound and the most challenging to integrate. Pause for a moment. If this exploration has stirred something in you, if you felt recognition in these words, you are not alone. Share in the comments which of these experiences has been most intense for you. Your story might be the key that helps someone else trust the truth of their own awakening. And if you haven't already, subscribe and tap the notification bell, not just to support this work, but to stay connected to a community of souls walking the same path of remembrance. Because what comes next are the two experiences that mark the deepest thresholds of consciousness, the ones that few dare to cross, yet every awakened soul eventually must. So, if you've been seeing the synchronicities, holding paradox without breaking, dreaming realities, more vivid than waking life, understand this. You're not imagining things, you're perceiving them. And there's a vast difference. Jung dedicated his life to documenting that difference, to showing us that what most call illusion is often the first glimpse of the real. The extraordinary is not outside you, it is awakening through you. This is Jung's most radical insight, and the one modern spirituality often gets completely wrong. Awakening doesn't destroy the ego, it destroys the ego's monopoly on consciousness. Jung called this reordering the ego. Self-axis, the dynamic relationship between your everyday identity and your deepest divine essence. When awakening deepens, that axis is transformed. The ego no longer sits at the center of your awareness. It becomes one voice among many in a much larger symphony of consciousness. Here's what actually happens. You begin experiencing yourself as multiple centers of awareness at once. There's the you who goes to work, pays bills, answers messages, the human character moving through the movie of life. And then there's what Jung called the self, an infinite, impersonal consciousness quietly watching the story unfold. And both are you, simultaneously. Jung wrote, the experience of the self is always a defeat for the ego. But he didn't mean annihilation. He meant dethronement. The ego discovers it was never the CEO of your life, only middle management. And that revelation is both humiliating and liberating. For those who awaken, this shift becomes undeniable. You can be fully engaged in a conversation, while another level of awareness observes you from beyond, not in dissociation, but in expanded presence. You see your own triggers activating in real time, and you watch yourself choose differently. You witness your patterns unfold mid-sentence and realize you no longer have to play them out. One of Jung's patients described this awakening perfectly. I'm living a split-screen existence. On one screen, I'm a person with a story of body, preferences, emotions. On the other, I'm infinite awareness having a temporary human experience. Neither side is more real. I'm not choosing between them. I'm living as both at once. It's maddening and miraculous. This dual awareness leads to experiences that, to the unawakened, sound like madness. You feel ancient beyond measure and newborn in every breath. You know yourself as both the drop and the ocean, literally, not metaphorically. Jung called this the relativization of the ego. Your personal identity becomes one expression of consciousness among countless possible ones. You no longer mistake yourself for the role you're playing, but you still play it with sincerity and humor. Yet, this stage comes with its own turbulence. The ego doesn't surrender quietly. It fights back through what Jung called inflation moments, where it tries to claim the self's revelations as its own achievements. You start hearing it whisper, I'm awakened, I'm special, I'm beyond ordinary people. But this is the ego's last trick, the shadow of enlightenment. And the universe responds with what Jung termed compensation. Humbling experiences designed to bring you back into balance. You might glimpse cosmic consciousness one moment and forget where you parked your car the next. You might channel words of timeless wisdom, then say something painfully human seconds later. You might feel completely enlightened, only to stumble right back into your oldest shadow patterns. This isn't failure, it's integration. It's the ongoing dance between the personal and the transpersonal, between your small self and your vast self. Jung was clear: the goal is not to eliminate the ego, but to relativize it, to let it find its rightful place in service to something greater. The awakened person learns to live as both a somebody and a nobody, someone special and completely insignificant, divine and beautifully human. That's why awakened beings often appear contradictory, deeply confident yet profoundly humble, powerful yet surrendered, wise yet innocent. They aren't confused. They're simply living from multiple levels of identity at once, each true in its own domain. And from this expanded center arises the fifth and final experience. Jung identified, perhaps the strangest, and certainly the most misunderstood of all. He called it living mythologically. But it doesn't mean pretending life is a fairy tale. It means realizing that your individual story is also a cosmic story, that your joys and struggles are expressions of universal patterns Jung called archetypes. You begin to sense that you're not merely living a life. Life, vast, ancient, intelligent, is living itself through you. Here's what Jung understood that changes everything. These 5 experiences are not random bursts of spiritual curiosity. They are symptoms of evolution itself, signs that human consciousness is outgrowing its old boundaries. Each person who undergoes them becomes part of what Jung called the collective individuation of humanity, the awakening of the species through the awakening of individuals. Think about what these phenomena truly reveal. Synchronicity shows us a living universe that responds directly to consciousness. The transcendent function demonstrates that the psyche is evolving beyond dualistic thought. Prophetic dreams whisper that time is not linear but fluid. The restructuring of the ego self-axis proves that awareness isn't limited to personality, and living mythologically reveals that every personal story is a cosmic story in disguise. Jung never saw these as mystical escapades. He saw them as psychological capacities, latent abilities within humanity, waiting for the right pressure to awaken. And those conditions, he said, are the very chaos, alienation, and suffering of modern life. The crisis is not a mistake. It's the catalyst. Jung wrote, the spiritual problem of modern man forces him to experience these things, not because he seeks them, but because consciousness itself is evolving, and these are its symptoms. This is why awakening is irreversible. Once these experiences begin, you cannot return to the old way of perceiving. You cannot unsee synchronicity once you've lived in dialogue with the universe. You cannot go back to either or thinking once the transcendent function has opened. You cannot dream ordinary dreams once you've received transmissions from the self. You cannot live only as ego once you've touched the infinite. You cannot see life as random once you've recognized the myth moving through it. This is what Jung called the irreversibility of consciousness. Each awakening experience permanently rewires the psyche. Psychologically speaking, you're no longer the same species. You've evolved into what Jung called modern man in search of a soul. But in finding that soul, you discover he is far vaster and far more mysterious than you ever imagined. And yes, this can be profoundly isolating. You begin living in a different dimension of reality, not better, but broader. You see what others see and also what they cannot. You experience what they experience and also what they have not yet evolved to perceive. It's like suddenly developing color vision in a grayscale world. You can describe the colors, paint them, even cry over their beauty, but to those who have not yet awakened that faculty, they remain invisible. And yet, here lies Jung's most crucial revelation. These experiences are not meant to separate you from humanity. They're meant to serve it. Every person who integrates these capacities becomes what Jung called a beacon of consciousness for the collective, not through preaching or teaching, but through simple presence. Your very existence, as someone who lives in conscious relationship with synchronicity, paradox, and archetype, helps make those realities more accessible to others. Jung warned that humanity is locked in a race between consciousness and catastrophe. Either enough individuals awaken to shift the collective field, or the species remains trapped in unconscious patterns that lead to destruction. Every person who develops synchronistic awareness, transcendent perception, prophetic dreaming, ego-self balance, and mythic living contributes to what Jung called the sum total of consciousness available to humanity. You are not having these experiences just for yourself. You are having them for all who cannot yet. What feels like isolation is actually initiation. What seems like personal awakening is collective evolution happening through you. So, if you find yourself living these 5 experiences, if reality speaks to you through synchronicities, if paradox feels like home, if your dreams are transmissions, if you live as both ego and self, if you sense the ancient myth playing themselves out through your life, you are not alone. You are part of what Jung foresaw as humanity's most important transformation, the birth of conscious evolution. Subscribe and join the growing wave of those walking this path. Share in the comments which of these experiences is most alive in you right now. Your courage to name it helps others trust their own awakening. And remember Jung's timeless warning and promise. The meeting with oneself is at first the meeting with one's own shadow. But beyond the shadow lies the light that redefines what it means to be human. Trust what you're experiencing. It's not madness, it's metamorphosis. To go deeper into Jung's full map of awakening consciousness, click the video on your screen now and step further into the frontier of the evolving soul.